Hello everyone, and welcome back to this 5th episode of Winnemuca. Today we're tackling two projects, a small pub next to the gas station and a livestock farm. We'll start by extending the ditch. I'm placing the building roughly where I want it. It's the Winnemuca from the UK region pack. I was inspired by a pub I found on Google Maps. Let's start by laying out the parking spaces. I'm placing them on both sides, just like in the reference image. I always prefer using invisible roads rather than drawing driveways. The rendering looks much better with the surfaces layered on top. I'm laying down a surface for the entrance walkway and the side terrace. We're adding net lanes to give the parking lot a bit of age. It's an old country pub, so the parking lot should look a little dilapidated. I'm adding a surface texture to make the asphalt look less artificial. Let's add some tire marks. A few asphalt patches and some repairs, as well as some unpatched potholes. I'm using a large rock from the Cliff Faces and Rocks kit pack. I'll use the same technique as for the rock in the mobile home park, lowering it with Move It and adjusting it with the Transform tool. I've decided to put a second small rock right next to it. Why not? Time for some flowers and bushes. I'm doing the outline with large bushes, which I'll then lower with Move It to make them look smaller and less tall. I'm placing some unkempt grass with leaves on top. A little bit of dust on the walkway. At this point, I noticed people were sitting on nothing. Let's give them some picnic tables so they can actually sit down instead of floating. We're continuing the line of bushes, keeping them at the same height using Move It. A few small trees with a messy, leafy grass surface. Let's dress up the ditches a little bit. Same technique as before. Here is the image that inspired me. The result looks quite similar. Now, let's move on to the livestock farm. I'm placing a road, so it's not sitting directly on the main country road. I'll set the owner's house back a little bit. Here is the reference image I found on Google Maps. For this farm in particular, a huge thank you to Confused Lil Devil, who created this completely customizable and upgradable cattle farm. It's an incredible asset, very functional and useful. Let's place several silos and buildings to house the animals. We're removing the original fences to redo them much larger. After that, I'll clear all the surfaces to put down the ones I prefer. I'm also removing any props I don't want. It's the same principle as in previous episodes. We're removing the speed layer from the road. Since this is a private entrance, we don't need it. We'll link everything with invisible roads to make sure all the paths are connected. Let's move the fences that aren't quite in the right spot. You can see I put an asphalt surface here, but I'll be changing that shortly. I'm running the fence along the roads, as if it had been placed afterward to take up all the available space between the paths. I'm using net lanes from dirty road for a change of pace from the usual asphalt. We're going back over all the roads and invisible paths. I'm going to use dirty road decals to round off the corners and create the parking spaces too. It's much less complicated than doing it with net lanes. I'm changing the surface of the owner's driveway to something a bit more prestigious. I just realized I didn't extend the borders all the way to the end of the driveway. A slightly more manicured grass surface for the owner's house. Different textures for the pens, with some areas looking more worn down where there's more traffic. I'm doing the first 3 pens the same way, but the center one a bit differently for variety. A few patches here and there with a different grass texture underneath. There we go, customized pens. I'm also adding spawn points for the animals to make the pens feel more alive. Underneath the silos, I'm putting a concrete surface. It looks sturdier that way. I'm using a mix of decals and surfaces. A small section of fertile land used for feeding the animals. And of course, we'll finish it off with some tractor tracks. We're making the grass look a bit less maintained with a surface overlay. We'll make sure all the silos have concrete bases. I'm also taking care of the ditch surfaces at the same time. I forgot to do the ditch first again. So now I have to move what I've already built. Small tip, always do the ditches first and add the buildings after. It saves you from having to undo and redo your work. I'm finishing up the silos I missed earlier. A small hedge to separate the house from the farm lot. Let's move on to the owner's landscaping. We'll spruce up the backyard with a terrace, a spa, a place set for the kids, and a barbecue. And obviously the mailboxes for both the owner and the company. Let's finish dressing up the ditches. I'm putting some long grass everywhere. I had to remove one spawn point because the cows were clipping through the fence into the ditch. Wildflowers and long grass everywhere. Now for the trees, we'll put a few in the pens and then wrap them around the rest of the property. I'm adding a net lane on top of the dirty road ones to make them look a bit darker. I found the original ones a bit too bright and clean. Let's add some dirt to the silos so they don't look brand new. A bit of rust too. I'm trying not to miss any of them. I'm adding tractor tracks to the gravel paths. A big thank you to the Broman 10 for the farming surface and decal pack mod. They're very practical and give a great look to the gravel paths. And there is the cattle farm. I'll show you the two inspiration photos for this area one more time. The pub and the farm. Let's take a quick tour. If you have any comments, suggestions, or even insults, don't be shy. Let me know in the comments. I think the final result looks very realistic. And that concludes our 5th episode of Winnemuca. Hope to see you again for the next one.